Dad, we've made our decision. Next week, you'll be moving into Maplewood Veterans Home. I looked up from the table, my hands still dusted with bronze powder from the old firefighter's helmet I'd been polishing. Across from me stood my son, Ryan Kane, 38, the same boy I once carried out of a burning house when he was 8. Now he looked at me the way people look at something that's in the way. A burden. A reminder of what they'd rather forget. I didn't speak. I only heard the slow thump of my own heartbeat, like an alarm that had already gone silent. The room grew still. Only the wall clock ticked the sound of existence that refuses to fade. I looked at my only son, the one who once held my hand at his mother's funeral, the boy I raised through every freezing winter. And now he was gently telling me there was no room left for me in the life I built. On the brown leather folder in his hand, I caught a small line of text, power of attorney. It hit me. A year ago, after I slipped in the garage, he'd brought me papers for medical consent. I'd signed them without reading. My voice came out rough. Son, whose decision is this? Ryan didn't look at me. Don't worry, Dad. I'm doing this for your own safety. You'll be better there. You'll be better there. 4 words meant to comfort, but in his eyes I saw only one intention: to make me disappear quietly. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is a witness for fathers who were forgotten too soon. And if this story already feels heavy in your chest, hit like so more people can hear what I'm about to tell you. That afternoon, Cleveland was colder than usual. Wind from Lake Erie slipped through the doorframe, carrying the scent of metal and the echo of faraway factories. In my small wooden house on the edge of town, I sat by the window. The light caught the dark burn marks on my hands, scars time never bothered to erase. My name is Douglas Kane, 72 years old, retired firefighter. I used to be the first man through the fire and the last one out. Now all I have left is the silence of this house, the cold of the tools in my cabinet, and a garden fading like memory. Ryan sat across from me, legs crossed, voice calm as if discussing the weather. Dad, Maplewood has a wing just for veterans. Doctors, nurses, 24-hour care. You'll have friends, people to talk to. I didn't look up. I poured coffee into a chipped ceramic mug. It once belonged to Captain Harold Whitman, who died in the chemical plant fire back in '98. I can still remember that day. The smoke was thick as ink. The oxygen tank hissed. Harold was trapped in the inspection room. I ran in knowing I had maybe 2 minutes of air left. The flames licked my face, hot enough to split the skin. But I pulled him out. 3 hours later, he died on the operating table, and I lived carrying the burn ever since. Ryan doesn't remember that. He only remembers the toys, the dinners his mother cooked, the safe years I paid for with my own lungs. Dad, this house is falling apart, he said. Pipes leak, the roof's bad, the heater's shot. I can't let you live alone like this. Can't let me or don't want to. My tone was even metallic. Lisa, my daughter-in-law, laughed softly. Oh, come on, Mr. Kane. We're just trying to help. Maplewood's wonderful. I've seen the photos, wide rooms, clean halls, a rose garden. At your age, it's practically heaven. I looked straight at her. And this house, what happens to it? Lisa's smile froze. She glanced at Ryan. He said flatly, we'll take care of the paperwork. Lease it, maybe sell it. Everything will be legal. I took a sip of cold coffee, bitterness spreading across my tongue. So it's already decided, Ryan nodded. Yes, we just want things settled before winter. Winter. I used to love that season when snow covered the roof and Ryan and I shoveled the driveway together, then sat by the fire while his mother sang, Take Me Home, Country Roads. Now the fireplace is still there, just no one left to light it. I stood and walked to the glass cabinet. Inside were old medals, photos of the firehouse, letters from the mayor. I touched the nameplate, Captain Douglas Kane, Firehouse 47. My hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from the effort of staying calm. Behind me, Lisa asked, "What are you thinking, Mr. Kane?" I turned my voice low. "I'm thinking, fire never really kills people. It's the cold that does." She didn't understand. She smiled politely. Ryan checked his watch, then stood. "We've got to go. Rest, Dad. I'll come back Saturday to pick you up." I didn't stop them. "Go. It's getting dark outside." The door shut with a soft click. Silence followed, thick as ash. I stepped onto the porch. The sky over Cleveland had turned violet. The sun sank behind bare trees, and the wind carried Ryan's voice from the yard. "Yeah, get the papers ready by the end of the week. My father moves out Saturday. Just follow procedure. I'll sign." I froze. The wind cut through me, carrying the damp smell of soil and betrayal. I turned back toward the house, the walls I'd painted, the porch I'd built. To them, it was property. To me, it was a lifetime. The door swung shut, hinges groaning like an old man's breath. I sat on the wooden steps, watching the car lights disappear down the road. The porch light flickered one last tired heartbeat. And as darkness settled over Cleveland, I knew this much: I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I'd saved people from fire before. Now it was time to stay calm inside one of my own. Inside the house, the air smelled faintly of smoke, the kind that never leaves old wood. The car engine faded into the distance. Light from the living room fell across the old firefighter's helmet, number 47, the last symbol of honor I still owned. And that night I swore to myself, if they thought they could take everything from me quietly, then they'd forgotten one thing about a man who's lived his life in fire. He always knows how to rebuild from ashes. I'd saved lives before, but this time, I'd have to save my own. I left my house in Cleveland on a Saturday morning. The air was sharp, the kind that slices through old bones. Lake Erie was wrapped in a thin layer of fog, like a mourning veil stretched across the horizon. Ryan showed up on time, the way a man shows up for a transaction. No hug, no look around. He just opened the trunk and said flatly, "I already set up your room at Maplewood. They'll take good care of you there." I placed my small suitcase on the back seat. Inside were only a few shirts, a notebook, and my old firefighter's helmet, the last piece of a life that used to mean something. As the car rolled away from the quiet neighborhood, I watched my wooden house shrink in the rearview mirror, then vanish, like I'd never lived there at all. 40 years of my life cut from the real like a scene no one cared to keep. Ryan turned on the radio. Some cheap pop song filled the silence, blending with the sound of wind through half-closed windows. Lisa sat beside him, pulling her coat tighter. Not a word. Not a glance. Not even the courtesy to ask if I was cold. About an hour later, a road sign appeared. Maplewood Veterans Home, 2 miles ahead. The facility stood between rows of leafless trees, pale yellow walls glistening with condensation. It didn't look terrible until we walked in. The air inside was thick with disinfectant and overcooked food. Fluorescent lights hummed above, washing everything in a tired white glow. A few residents sat motionless near the TV, faces, blank eyes flickering like dying bulbs. This was the place where I was promised I'd live better. A man in a white coat stepped out from the nurse's station. Tall, balding, and carrying the kind of authority that comes from habit, not heart. "Mr. Kane, right?" His voice was dry like paper. I'm Dr. Alan Morris, director of the facility. Welcome to Maplewood. Welcome. I'd never heard a word sound so cold. Ryan shook his hand, the handshake of someone handing over property. Please take care of my father. He's stubborn, but he behaves when he needs to. They both laughed, that quiet, satisfied laugh people share when they've already won. Dr. Morris handed me a clipboard. Tiny print read, "Admission and waiver of liability." I skimmed it. The form gave Maplewood full authority schedule medication meals nearly every decision that made a man feel human. I signed it. Said nothing. Let them think I was weak obedient. People don't guard against what they think is harmless prey. Ryan turned to me. I'll come back in a few weeks, Dad. Just rest. They know what they're doing here. I nodded. No anger, no blessing. Just silence. I watched their car pull out of the parking lot, wheels splashing through a puddle, leaving behind a streak of cold mud. Dr. Morris led me down a narrow hallway. Wallpaper peeling at the corners, fluorescent bulbs flickering, humming low like restless bees. You'll be in room 12, he said. Your roommate's Eleanor Marsh, retired nurse. Quiet woman. Keep it that way. The room was small, 2 iron beds, a chipped wooden table, and air that smelled faintly of bleach and rain. A woman sat by the window, silver hair pulled back neatly, posture straight. When she looked up, her eyes were sharp, alert, like someone who saw too much to ever look away again. I'm Eleanor, she said, voice rough but steady. Douglas, I replied. Firefighter. I nodded. She smiled faintly. I was an army nurse. Now, I just count the days. We didn't speak again. Only the ticking of the clock filled the air, and the sound of Dr. Morris's footsteps fading down the hall. I sat on the bed. The metal frame was colder than memory. The mattress thinner than any field cot I'd slept on during a blaze. A crooked photo hung on the wall, a group of old soldiers forcing a smile for the camera. I looked at them, and for a second saw myself there too. Lunch came at 3, a plastic tray, lukewarm soup, 2 slices of dry bread. I ate slowly, each bite a small reminder that endurance has many forms. Eleanor's voice broke the silence. You're new. Don't let them see you fight back. The quieter you are, the longer you last. Who's they? I asked. She glanced toward the door, almost before answering, voice low. Management. Some new company bought Maplewood months ago. Cut staff, switched suppliers, cheap meds, smaller portions. The place is rotting from the inside. What company? She frowned. I only heard 2 aides whisper once. Something like Future Holdings. Future Holdings. The name lingered. It sounded like a promise and a threat all at once. Night fell. Light from the hallway slipped under the door, trembling against the wall. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Across the room, Eleanor's breathing was slow, even. Outside, the wind scraped against the windows, metal groaning like tired souls. I tried to sleep, but my mind wandered back to my house, the wooden door I built, the lavender I planted behind the fence, the folding chair where I used to watch the sunset. All of it now belonged to people who saw it only as property. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Martha Lewis, my old neighbor. 4 words. Doug, you need to see this. Attached was a photo. I opened it, and there it was, my front yard. A sign staked into the ground, tilting in the wind. For sale. Contact Ryan Kane, realtor partner. Silence. Except for the sound of my own pulse, steady burning like embers that refused to die. I stared at the photo again. My hand trembled not from shock, but from clarity. This move to Maplewood wasn't about my health or my safety. It was about clearing the path. My home had been sold long before I ever left it. I set the phone down and looked up at the gray ceiling. In that stillness, Ryan's voice echoed in my head. "You'll be better there, Dad." I almost laughed. The sound came out low, cracked, cold. "You're wrong, Ryan," I whispered. "You're the one who's about to learn what it feels like to have nothing left." They thought I'd fade quietly. But I've lived long enough to know silence is where fire begins again. My first morning at Maplewood began with the sound of metal hitting metal and the smell of antiseptic hanging thick in the air. I woke earlier than anyone else. 30 years in the fire department had wired me that way, always up before dawn, waiting for the alarm that never came anymore. These days, the only siren I still heard was the one inside my head. Breakfast was served at 6 cold eggs, dry toast, and coffee so weak it tasted like regret. Eleanor sat across from me, quiet, her cloudy eyes catching the pale fluorescent light. "You're not eating?" she asked. "I've had worse," I said, managing a faint smile. Back then, at least I was free. After breakfast, I walked down the hall. The window looked out over the courtyard, blanketed in morning fog. I pulled out my phone, the one thread that still tied me to the outside world. The photo from Martha was still there, the for sale sign standing crooked in front of my house. Under it, her message, "They already signed the contract, Doug. I'm sorry you had to find out this way." I called Ryan. He picked up after 3 rings. "Dad." His tone was calm, rehearsed, the voice of a man who believes he's in control. "Ryan," I said slowly. "I saw the picture. The sign in front of the house." "Oh, that," he replied. "I was going to tell you. We're just finalizing everything so you can stay at Maplewood long-term, safer, more comfortable." "Safer," I repeated. "And by finalizing, you mean just selling the house, Dad. The money goes into a managed account. You'll get a private room, better care. I'm doing this for you." I was silent for a few seconds. Then I asked quietly, "And where exactly did you get that right?" He hesitated. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "The power of attorney, Ryan. You remember last year after I fell in the garage? You brought a paper, said it was for medical purposes. I signed it because I trusted you." On the other end, I heard him exhale that long, tired sigh of someone caught, but not sorry. "Dad, let's not make this complicated. You signed it. I'm just doing what's necessary. I don't want you to stress about it." "What's necessary," I repeated, each word heavy as metal. "Does that include taking your father's home?" Then Lisa's voice cut in smooth, sharp, the kind that leaves frost in the air. "Douglas, you're overreacting. Everything's legal. Your signature's on the papers. If you'd like, I can send you a copy. But honestly, you should rest. Don't let your blood pressure spike over something so small. Something so small." That's what she called it, stripping away everything I'd built. I took a slow breath, forcing my anger to stay buried under calm. "Ryan," I said. Voice dropping low, "I've pulled people out of fire before. But this time it looks like you're the one who needs saving from the fire you just started." He said nothing. I heard Lisa whisper, "Hang up." Then silence. I stood there, phone still in my hand, the light from the window washing across my face. Outside, life went on. Inside, I was a photograph left behind, still outdated, voiceless. Eleanor stepped out of the room, holding a cup of water. "Bad news?" she asked. "No," I said softly. "Just old news I finally caught up to." She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Don't let them kill you with your own silence, Douglas." Her words stayed with me the rest of the afternoon. Around 5, when the light through the window turned cold orange, someone appeared at my door. It was Martha Lewis, my old neighbor. She wore a gray knit hat, breathless, clutching a yellow envelope. The guards let her in. She'd told them she was my distant cousin. "Martha," I was stunned. "I couldn't just sit back, Doug," she said quickly. "I saw strangers at your house yesterday. Inspecting the roof, the walls, the kind of people who measure things before they own them." She handed me the envelope. "I've got a friend at the county recorder's office. These are copies of the sale documents." I opened them. At the top, purchase agreement. Douglas Kane Estate. Below it, Ryan Kane's signature. The date stopped me cold. 2 days before, I was admitted to Maplewood. I read it again, and again. My blood chilled, but my mind sharpened. This wasn't about care or safety. This was a plan. I wasn't being taken care of. I was being removed. Martha's voice trembled. "Doug, what are you going to do?" I folded the papers, slid them into my coat pocket. "What I've always done, Martha," I said quietly. "When I see a fire, I find the source." Her eyes softened with worry. "Do you have anyone who can help?" I nodded. "Benjamin Moore. He used to be our fire department's attorney. He knows how paperwork works, and more importantly, he knows me." She grabbed my hand, eyes wet. "Be careful, Doug. They might have already planned for you to fight back." I smiled a thin, cold smile that made her understand the man standing before her wasn't beaten. "I know, Martha, but they forgot one thing." "What's that? A firefighter never runs from the fire. He just waits for the right time to put it out." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat under the weak lamp, spreading the documents across the table. The lines, the signatures, the dates, all evidence. Not of betrayal anymore, but of arrogance, the kind that assumes an old man won't look back. On the table, my helmet caught the light, Unit 47 glowing faintly, like an ember that refused to die. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 short lines. Step 1, call Benjamin Moore. Step 2, stay quiet. Step 3, let them believe I've surrendered. Out in the hallway, Dr. Morris's footsteps echoed steady, mechanical, like a predator pacing its cage. I blew out the lamp and sat in the dim moonlight. Outside, the grass was silver under the cold. Inside, my thoughts burned slow, deliberate. If anyone ever asked me when the fire started, I'd tell them it wasn't when they sold my house. It began the moment I realized my own son had struck the match. 3 days after my last call with Ryan, a man arrived at Maplewood. Unlike everyone else who came through that door, he didn't look at me like a broken appliance left too long on the shelf. He wore a dark wool coat, steel-rimmed glasses, and the expression of someone who's seen enough of the world's rot to stay steady through it. Douglas Kane, his voice was deep, certain. I nodded. "Benjamin Moore," he said, handing me a card. "Old legal counsel for the fire department. Harold Whitman mentioned you more than once." The name hit me like a spark to dry wood. Harold Whitman, my old captain. The man I pulled from the burning chemical warehouse in 1998. The man I couldn't save. Benjamin opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. "Before he passed, Harold left a small will. I tried to reach you, but your son seems to have blocked or redirected all mail to your old address." I took the envelope in my hands. The handwriting on the front made my throat tighten. "To Douglas, the man who pulled me from the fire." My voice cracked slightly. "When did he die? 2022. Benjamin said softly. "Lung cancer. He lived long enough to write you this letter. I opened it carefully. Inside were three things: a copy of his will, a certificate of ownership in Whitman Fire Systems, and a folded handwritten letter. The paper was yellowed, the ink smudged, but the handwriting was firm, just like his voice had been. Doug. You pulled me from the flames and gave me 20 more years I never thanked you for properly. Now it's my turn to pull you out. I had no children, my wife passed long ago. I'm leaving you my small house in Fairview Park, my 12% share in Whitman Fire Systems, and what's left in the old employee trust fund. Don't take it as charity, think of it as a small return on the breath you gave me that night. Live with dignity, Doug. Don't ever let anyone extinguish it, not even with paper. Your friend Harold. My hands trembled when I finished reading. Not from sorrow, but from something else. Something reignited. A flame I thought had died. The kind that burns without smoke, the kind made of trust. Benjamin spoke softly. Harold's assets include the Fairview Park house, 12% of Whitman Fire Systems, and about $180,000 in the employee trust. All legally recorded with the Cuyahoga County Court. I kept my eyes on the letter. Ryan doesn't know about this, does he? Benjamin shook his head. No. I checked the mail logs. Every piece of correspondence addressed to you was rerouted to his address. It's possible he was keeping things from you. I said nothing. The weak winter light from the window flickered across the wall, glinting off Benjamin's glasses. He continued steady and professional. I also reviewed the sale of your Cleveland property. Ryan used your power of attorney to sign the transfer without your acknowledgement. That qualifies as elder financial exploitation under Ohio law. You can contest it, but we'll need to be careful. I looked at him, my voice low. Careful. How? You've got two paths. One, take it public, file in court, make noise, draw the press. Two, go quiet, deliberate, invisible, precise. I have a feeling you'll pick the second. A faint smile crossed my lips. You guessed right. I don't need loud justice. I need justice that stands up without shouting. Benjamin nodded, sliding a new folder across the table. This is the plan. We'll revoke the POA through the county court, restore your legal control, and form a limited liability company, Whitman Holdings, LLC. Under that entity, you can invest, repurchase assets, and operate without your name attached. When the time comes, we'll take it all back, one deed, one share at a time. I was silent for a long moment. The fluorescent light above flickered, bouncing off the scars on my hand. Do you know what the hardest part of being a firefighter is? I asked. Benjamin tilted his head. It's not walking into the fire, I said. It's knowing when to go in. Too soon, everyone dies. Too late, there's nothing left to save. I looked him dead in the eye. We'll do it. But quietly. No lawsuits. No noise. I want my son to think I've accepted defeat. I want him to believe I've gone soft. Benjamin smirked. You want them to burn themselves? I nodded. I just want them to see that when the fire comes back, not everyone has the courage to walk through it. He leaned back, his voice low but firm. I'll start by pulling the POA. Then we'll transfer the assets into Whitman Holdings. It'll take a few weeks. In the meantime, tell no one you've got property money or a reason to stand tall again. I placed Harold's letter back into the envelope carefully, like sealing a vow. At the door, Eleanor was standing quietly watching us. I gave her a slight nod, and she understood this was not a story for open air. Benjamin packed his case, but before he left, he said quietly, Doug, can I tell you something honest? Go ahead. Most men would forgive. But not you. You're not loud. You're dangerous in silence, and that's the kind people should fear." I chuckled softly. "You've never heard a fire burn in silence, have you, Ben? It's the calmest sound in the world, and the scariest." When he left, I sat alone in the dim room, the yellow light spilling across Harold's letter. Outside, the wind tore through the pines, making the windows rattle like the heartbeat of someone about to step back into battle. I took my pen and wrote under Harold's final line, "Don't let anyone extinguish your honor, not even with paper." Beneath it, I added, "I won't just protect my honor, Harold. I'll use it to light justice itself." I folded the letter, laid it beside my old helmet. Two relics, witnesses to two different rescues, one from real fire and one from the fire inside men's hearts. Some debts are paid with money, others with fire. After meeting Benjamin Moore, I started looking at Maplewood differently. It wasn't a shelter anymore. It was a crime scene. And I was the first man to step into the fire no one else could see. Every morning began the same, the clatter of metal trays, the sting of disinfectant mixed with lukewarm soup, and that pale, fluorescent light so harsh it erased the memory of real sunlight. I sat in the dining hall surrounded by the hollow rhythm of spoons scraping plastic trays, a choir of the forgotten. Eleanor, my roommate, kept her old ritual, eat half, hide the rest in a paper box. "I don't trust what they call nutritional porridge," she whispered. I looked into my own bowl. The liquid was cloudy gray, more like what you'd rinse a pot with than food. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a breath. "Have you noticed it? The taste in the water. The color of the pills they gave us last night. It's different." I said nothing, just nodded once. Here, silence was the only safe language. That night I began taking notes. In a small notebook hidden under my pillow, I wrote down everything: medication times, meal changes, the names of staff who vanished between shifts. And in my pocket, I carried a small voice recorder, the one Benjamin had mailed me. His words echoed in my head, "Collect everything. Even the smallest spark can prove where the fire began." A week later, I met Caleb Rivers, the new maintenance technician. 29, thin, messy brown hair, the look of a man trying to hold on to decency in a place that feeds on it. One afternoon, I was sitting in the back courtyard when he came to fix an old light. "Mr. Kane," he said, "I saw your name on the Veterans Board from Firehouse 47. "You were really a firefighter." "I was," I said. "Now I'm just the ashes of one." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Not to me." A man who once ran into fire never really stops. Then he looked around before lowering his voice. "Since the new company took over, they've been cutting everything: medicine staff hours, even meals. The weakest residents are being transferred out. Dr. Morris says it's rehab centers, but no one's ever seen them come back." I asked, "Do you have proof?" He shook his head. "No, but I keep my eyes open. You should too." That night when Dr. Morris made his rounds, I stood quietly at the end of the hallway. His footsteps echoed slow and deliberate, the sound of a man used to owning the silence around him. When he spotted me, he stopped. His eyes gleamed under the fluorescent light, cold, dissecting. "Mr. Kane," he said, voice sharp as glass, "I hear you've been quite social. Asking questions, taking notes. We don't need heroes here. We need compliance." I met his gaze, my tone steady, each word falling like steel. "Knowing when to put out a fire, that's the only skill I've got left." Something flickered behind his eyes, confusion, then contempt. "Careful, Mr. Kane. Not all fires here burn with gasoline." He turned and walked away. His shoes squeaked across the waxed floor, the sound of authority pretending not to shake. If he meant to threaten me, he picked the wrong man. On my 14th day at Maplewood, the rain came, heavy and steady, hammering the tin roof like the ticking of a slow clock. Lunch was as dull as always, silence, exhaustion, eyes that had forgotten how to hope. I was sitting by the door across from Eleanor when a sound broke the monotony. A man 2 tables over, Mr. Peterson, 75, began to choke. His hands trembled, face turning red, eyes wide with panic. The room froze. A nurse screamed but didn't move. I was on my feet before I even thought about it. Old instincts don't need permission. 3 steps, behind him. Arms around his midsection, 1, 2, 3 pulls. The chunk of food shot out, skidding across the floor. Peterson gasped, then coughed, then breathed again. I steadied him, my voice calm. "Breathe, sir. Slow." The whole room was silent except for the rain beating on the roof. A young nurse ran over, shaking a tray of water in her hands. I didn't know what to do." I looked at her gently. "It's all right. But next time, don't wait for orders." Eleanor stood, eyes steady, giving me a small nod, the kind that said, "I knew you weren't done yet." Minutes later, Dr. Morris appeared, still holding a coffee cup, irritation written all over his face. "What happened?" he barked. A nurse explained, pointing toward me. Morris smirked. "So our hero still has it in him. But this is a care facility, not a rescue site. Next time, let staff handle emergencies." I wiped my hands with a napkin. "If I'd waited for your staff," I said evenly, "he'd be dead." The room went still again. Morris's jaw tightened. His hand gripped his glasses too hard. Then he forced a thin smile. "You seem to enjoy the attention." I met his eyes, voice cold as rain. "No. I just enjoy seeing people stay alive." He turned and left, footsteps faster this time. But his shoulders, I noticed, were tense. That wasn't anger. That was fear. By nightfall, the whispers had spread. Through corridors, dining halls, medicine lines, the firefighters still got it. Some nodded when they passed me, others smiled faintly, tiny sparks of hope in a place built to extinguish it. Eleanor said softly as we watched the rain streak down the window, "They fear you, you know. Not because you saved someone, but because you reminded them they're still alive." I looked outside. The rain had stopped. Droplets clung to the glass, catching the pale yellow glow from the hallway lights. In the far corner of the courtyard, I saw Dr. Morris talking to a man in a dark suit, brief, tense, deliberate. I couldn't hear their words, but their faces told enough. Something beneath the calm surface of Maplewood was shifting. I turned back to my notebook, opened to a fresh page. The first line I wrote that night was shaky but sharp. "The fire at Maplewood isn't burning. It's smoldering." I closed the notebook, listening to the wind whistling through the crack in the window. Then I smiled faintly. Some fires need oxygen. Others just need truth. And me, I've always known how to read the wind. News travels fast, faster than I ever expected. Within 3 days, everyone at Maplewood had heard about me saving Mr. Peterson from choking. They didn't talk about the accident itself. They talked about the old firefighter who still did the right thing. I never cared for attention, but in a place where people were trained to stay silent, sometimes one act of courage is enough to remind others that dignity still exists. A week later, Dr. Morris began avoiding me. But I could feel his eyes, those quick glances, every time he passed, the kind of look a man gives when he's no longer sure he's in control. Then one Monday morning, while I was sitting under the porch reading my notebook, a man appeared at the gate. Leather jacket, camera bag. Quick steps, quiet confidence. He walked straight toward me and flashed a press badge. "Ethan Miller, Cleveland Sentinel," he said. I looked up. He was in his early 40s, sharp eyes, calm tone, the kind of journalist who's seen too much and still believes stories can matter. "I heard about you," he said. "A retired firefighter living in a care home still saving lives. I'd like to write about that, not a headline-chasing piece, just about dignity. Would you talk to me?" I looked around. A few staff members were watching us from the hallway. "At Maplewood," I said slowly, "they don't like reporters, especially the kind who remind people that the place still has a conscience." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then I'm right where I need to be." We sat under the old porch roof. Light rain fell, tapping gently against my old fire helmet sitting beside me, the only piece of my past they couldn't take away. He asked about the rescue, about life in Maplewood, about how I ended up here. I didn't tell him everything. Just enough. "My son thought I needed care," I said. "But sometimes care is the easiest way to make someone disappear." He went quiet for a long time, then asked, "Do you mind if I quote that 'do what you need'?" I said, "Just don't pity me. I don't need sympathy. I need justice to find its way." 2 days later, the story went live. A small feature on the community page title, simple, almost modest, "The Firefighter They Left Behind." No dramatics, no cheap words. Just a quiet piece about an old man who still remembered how to save lives and how the world had forgotten to save him back. The story spread not loud but steady, like rain soaking into dry ground. Veterans groups shared it with one tag: "Honor never retires." Honor doesn't retire. I read the comments, hundreds from people I'd never met. "He deserves respect. We owe that generation more than a cold room and a plastic tray." I turned off the screen. Not proud, not angry, just lighter, because for the first time in years, it felt like justice was walking in the right direction. 2 days after that, a woman appeared at my door. Brown coat, calm posture badge on her chest, Angela Brooks, Adult Protective Services, State of Ohio. Her smile was polite, her eyes were not. Those were the eyes of someone who shows up when things stop adding up, "Mr. Kane," she said. "I'm here regarding your story and some reports about your financial power of attorney. I'd like to review the documentation your son holds." I sat up straight. "What exactly are you investigating?" "There are signs of elder financial exploitation," she said. "If you're willing to cooperate, we can open a formal inquiry." I held her gaze. "My cooperation doesn't come from pity," I said. "I'm not a victim. I just want the law to do its job quietly and correctly." Her expression softened. That she said is exactly what I needed to hear. She took notes quickly, her pen steady. "I'll contact the county court to verify the original POA and property transfers. And Mr. Kane," she added, lowering her voice, "not everyone has the clarity or the courage to stand up against their own children. I respect that." I didn't answer. Respect means nothing if justice doesn't carry its real name. Before leaving, she handed me her card. "If you hear anything urgent, call me directly. This line's private." I looked down at the printed words, "Elder Financial Justice Division." Two things you rarely see side by side, justice and mercy. That evening, Benjamin called. His voice was low, deliberate. "Doug, I've got news." "Good or bad?" I asked. "Both," he said. "I found something at the county courthouse. Dr. Morris's brother, he's a tax consultant for Future Holdings. The same company Eleanor mentioned. They're deep in debt, over $8 million. If they don't liquidate assets, including Maplewood, by next quarter, they're finished." I said nothing. Benjamin continued. And that's our opening. When the property goes up for sale, Whitman Holdings can step in quietly. But we have to stay invisible. If Ryan learns you've got money or assets, he'll interfere. I glanced around the room. Eleanor was asleep, her breathing soft, the kind of peace that only exists before a storm breaks. I spoke quietly. Ben, you know I'm not buying Maplewood to live in it. I'm buying it to cleanse it, to give back the dignity they took from these people. I know, he said. And I'll make sure this time justice doesn't burn to ash. When the call ended, I sat in silence. The clock ticked slow, deliberate, each second, a match waiting to strike. Outside, rain hit the windows in steady rhythm. To most, it was just weather. To me, it was time counting down. Because time isn't the enemy, it's the flame, and it only burns those who stand still. That night, I wrote one more line in my notebook. When the law finally speaks, I won't have to shout. I'll just stand tall. I closed the notebook and looked out the window. The moonlight spilled over the peeling sign, Maplewood Veterans Home, the letters fading, flaking off, like old lies. I knew then this place would change hands, and when it did, I'd be the one holding the torch, not to illuminate, but to burn away every hand that defiled justice. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it walks quietly, and sometimes it signs its name on paper. After my call with Benjamin, I understood. This war wasn't about my old house in Cleveland anymore. It was about the offices where men in suits kill with signatures, not knives. 3 days later, Benjamin came to Maplewood. No tie, no briefcase shine, just a windbreaker, and that same quiet resolve I trusted. We sat in the back courtyard where the cameras couldn't hear us. The sky was silver, the kind of light that warns of rain, but never apologizes for it. Benjamin opened his worn leather folder and slid a document toward me. This, he said, is the revocation of your power of attorney, filed and certified by the Cuyahoga County Court. Ryan can't move a single dollar in your name anymore. I didn't smile, didn't sigh in relief, just felt that hollow stillness, the kind you get when smoke finally clears and you realize you're still breathing. Benjamin leaned closer. Next step, we form a trust. It'll hold everything you now own from Harold's will, and under that trust we build a parent company, Whitman Holdings, LLC. It'll stand as your front. Every purchase, every bid, every contract goes through it, even when we buy Maplewood. I looked at the words printed on the page, registered owner, Whitman Holdings, LLC. That name, I said quietly, Harold would have liked it. Benjamin smiled. He gave you honor. Now you're using honor to shelter justice. That night I met Caleb in the maintenance room. The air smelled of metal and detergent. The old washing machine rattled like an asthmatic breathing in the dark. He handed me an envelope, his voice low. I printed these from the internal server. Dr. Morris has been cutting meal costs by 25%. He's selling leftover meds to a third-party distributor. Some of the vitamins are fake. I unfolded the pages. Dates, numbers, his signature. Proof right there in black ink. Do you understand what you're doing, son? I asked. Caleb shrugged. I'm doing what's right. I may not run into fires like you did, but I won't stand by while people here die slow. I placed a hand on his shoulder. I've lived long enough to know doing the right thing always costs something. He smiled faintly. I'm okay paying a little if it means someone finally stands taller than this place. I folded the report and slid it inside my notebook. The pieces were falling together now, Morris. Future Holdings, Ryan. All connected on the same line, even if they didn't know the noose was tightening. Outside Maplewood, another storm was brewing. In Cleveland, Ryan Kane sat in his new apartment surrounded by files and unopened bills. Rain hammered against the glass, but the noise in his head was louder. An email blinked on his screen from his construction firm project contract, terminated due to restructuring. That same day, Lisa texted him, "I talked to someone from Future Holdings. They're expanding real estate investments. We should buy in Ryan. It's a chance to rebuild." He stared at the name Future Holdings. The same name printed on the deed that sold my house. The same name whispered through Maplewood's corridors. But Ryan didn't see the whole fire. He only saw a spark he thought could save him. Lisa saw money. And greed always thinks it's smarter than gravity. "Don't be afraid," she said over dinner, her tone sweet and sharp. "Everyone's investing. It's how we get back up. That house money, at least it'll grow." Ryan swirled his wine eyes, tired. "And if it doesn't," Lisa smiled thinly. "Then we borrow more. Future Holdings has big backers. They even manage Maplewood." He didn't know it yet, but that company was drowning. Not investing, liquidating. Selling off assets to stay afloat. And he, in all his arrogance, had just bought a ticket on a sinking ship. A week later, the emails began. Payment overdue, $45,000. Then another, and another. Lisa started dodging his calls. "Just temporary," she'd say. "We'll bounce back." But denial is a warm blanket in a burning room. Ryan began drinking more. And in those long, hazy hours, maybe, just maybe, he thought about me. About the father he'd pushed into a home. The man whose house he'd sold to keep safe. I didn't know all of this as it happened. But Benjamin did. He sent a message late one evening. "Future Holdings is collapsing. They're preparing to liquidate assets, including Maplewood. Ryan and Lisa invested in their portfolio. They're going down with it." I read the message. No smile, no anger. Just the quiet satisfaction of a flame touching the exact spot I meant it to. Eleanor found me sitting alone later that night. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "About people," I said. "And how often they burn themselves while believing they're keeping warm." She nodded slowly. "Will you take revenge, Douglas?" I looked at her steady, cold, certain. "I don't need revenge. I just want them to face what they lit. That's not vengeance. It's balance." When the lights went out that night, I opened my notebook. The early pages were filled with numbers and schedules, evidence, timing, truth. Now I added one more line. They're burning themselves. My job is to make sure the wind blows in the right direction. I closed the book, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. The weak light above reflected off my old fire helmet, a faint red shimmer flickering across the room, like a flame waiting for command. I didn't know how this would end, but I knew one thing: when fire meets wind, the only thing left behind is truth. Some fires destroy, others cleanse. The trick is knowing which one you're standing in. Justice doesn't always announce itself with a gavel or a headline. Sometimes it slips in quietly, in the sound of a new sign being hung by hands that will never be thanked. 3 months passed like a song without lyrics, each note carrying the smell of paper ink and official seals. Benjamin called it the transition period. I called it the quiet before the ashes learned to rest. On the surface, nothing had changed at Maplewood. The soup was still tasteless. The nurses still moved like ghosts. And Dr. Morris still wore that smirk the kind men wear when they believe they own the world. But underneath everything was shifting. Future Holdings had defaulted on its state taxes. Their debts outgrew their lies. And when the liquidation files reached the county, Whitman Holdings LLC entered the auction silently, Benjamin filing the paperwork under a separate trust, my name nowhere in sight. No one suspected the old man in room 12 was orchestrating the quiet takeover of the very place meant to bury him. It took exactly 92 days. When the final papers cleared, the property changed hands without ceremony. That morning, Cleveland's air felt thin and sharp, like the world had paused to take a breath. They raised the new sign at the gate. Fresh gold letters shimmered against gray sky, Whitman Kane Veterans Home. I stood at the window, one hand resting on the cold frame. No applause, no speeches, just the faint scent of paint and the silence of something redeemed. Justice, I thought, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it exhales. 3 days later, the hammer finally fell. Dr. Alan Morris, the man who treated veterans like balance sheets, was dismissed. No headlines, no drama, just one meeting behind closed doors and a single flash drive containing his voice. These residents are walking ATMs. Every pill I cut saves us $1. The board didn't argue. The decision was unanimous. Morris walked out that afternoon, coat buttoned high against the rain, eyes down a man who'd mistaken cruelty for control and only realized too late that both are fragile. Caleb stood beside me watching him go. "It's strange," he whispered, "like watching a fire die on its own." I shook my head. "It didn't die," I said. "It burned exactly what it needed to." The new administrator arrived a week later. Her name was Sophie Walker, 50 years old, once head nurse at a veterans hospital in Columbus. She carried herself like someone who had known loss, but refused to let it turn her bitter. When we met, she smiled with quiet respect. "You must be the advisor," she said. "I just help people remember who they were," I replied. She nodded. "Then I need you more than you think. This place forgot that a long time ago." And she meant it. By the end of her first week, the changes began to show. Meal trays no longer rattled with the sound of neglect. The soup thickened. The coffee grew dark again. You could smell butter and beef stew drifting through the halls. Real food, the kind that makes people talk again. The nurse's laughter returned, first nervous at first, then genuine. Caleb fixed the heaters in the west wing. The air warmed. Patients began sitting by the windows again, not because they were waiting for anyone, but because sunlight finally felt welcome there. Sophie walked the corridors, daily clipboard in hand, stopping to ask names, to listen, to make sure no one was invisible anymore. She replaced the blinding fluorescent bulbs with softer amber lights. "Warmth," she said, "is a kind of medicine." Eleanor noticed it first. She looked around the dining hall one morning, eyes glinting like she'd rediscovered something buried. She whispered, "I forgot what it feels like to wait for a new day." I asked, "What does it feel like?" She smiled faintly. "Like living instead of waiting to die." Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than expected, revealing grass where mud used to be. One afternoon, I walked into the courtyard. The benches were full. Men who hadn't spoken in months now argued about baseball. A woman in her 80s painted a birdhouse, and Caleb, with oil stains on his hands, was fixing the sprinkler lines, humming off-key to a country song playing from the maintenance radio. Eleanor sat near the lavender patch, the breeze playing with the edges of her white shawl. She turned toward me and said softly, "Do you see it, Douglas?" Sometimes, all it takes is one person remembering, and everything changes. I looked around. She was right. The walls that once reeked of bleach now smelled faintly of soap and cinnamon. The wallpaper had been replaced with framed photos of veterans, real faces, real lives. Even the air felt different, lighter, freer, human. Maplewood was gone. What stood in its place was something almost sacred. I sat down beside Eleanor. "The world used to be simple," I said quietly. "When a fire broke out, you fought it. You didn't wait for a meeting to decide if it was worth saving." She smiled. "And when you saved it, they called you a hero." I shook my head. "No. The real heroes were the ones who stayed after the fire to rebuild what was lost." I looked at the garden, at Caleb, at Sophie, at the people laughing under the sun. Then I said, almost to myself, my old captain Harold Whitman once told me, "Not everyone gets to die in peace, but everyone deserves to live with dignity." He was right. Eleanor's voice softened. "He sounds like someone worth remembering." "He was," I said. "And now I think he'd be proud to see his name here." She looked at the sign glowing under the sunset. "Whitman Kane Veterans Home," and nodded slowly. "I think he already does." That evening, Sophie held a small gathering in the dining hall. No cameras, no officials, just coffee and light music playing from a small speaker. She raised her cup and said, "To everyone who stayed when it was hard, and to those who reminded us what it means to care." Everyone clapped quietly. I didn't. I just sat back, watching the sound of their applause blending with the hum of life returning. For once, I didn't feel like an old man waiting out the clock. I felt like a firefighter again, not charging into flames, but watching as something pure began to rise from the smoke. That night, I returned to my room. The corridor was silent, but not empty. Light glowed from door to door, not sterile, not cold, just warm enough to remind me I was still here. I opened my notebook and wrote slowly, the ink thick and steady. "The fire has quieted, but its ashes still light the way home." I placed the notebook beside my old helmet, the brass badge catching a glint of light from the hallway. Eleanor stopped by the door. She leaned against the frame, voice soft. "Will you ever leave this place, Douglas?" I looked at her, then at the glowing courtyard beyond the window. "Not yet," I said. "I'll stay. Until this place remembers itself so well, it no longer needs me to remind it." She nodded and walked away, her steps fading into the hum of the night. I turned off the lamp. Outside, the garden lights shimmered on wet leaves. No flames, no smoke, just warmth. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I'd finally come home. Justice didn't roar that day. It whispered through painted walls, hot meals, and the sound of people remembering they mattered. Not every fire dies in an instant. Some burn slow until there's nothing left to consume but the man who lit it. Ryan Kane had started to burn. June 2025. Cleveland was hot, sun-bright air, heavy streets humming. But for Ryan, the city had already begun to fall apart in silence. That morning, he opened his laptop. An email from Future Holdings, the company he once believed would restore his place in the world. Just one sentence: project delayed indefinitely due to liquidity concerns. Your investment will be reassessed during restructuring. Reassessed, the corporate word for gone. He stared at the screen. The numbers on his account blinked back $18.42. That was all that remained. Lisa stepped out of the bedroom, silk robe, phone in hand. Her perfume still expensive, her patience no longer so. "What's wrong?" she asked. Ryan didn't answer. She snatched the laptop, read the message, and laughed a sharp, broken sound. "You're joking, right? This is the company you poured your father's money into. They said the new project was launching, Lisa. They promised," she cut in, voice rising. "They promised, and you believed them. You burned everything." The house, my savings, you turned us into a punchline. He stood there silent, watching the woman he once thought was home slam the bedroom door so hard that their wedding photo fell frame, cracking against the floor. A week later, a message arrived from the bank: credit card payment overdue. Please remit within 7 days. That same day, his company sent another email, a cold template signed by Human Resources. Due to restructuring, your position has been eliminated. He was one of 47 names on the list. Lisa packed that night. No tears, no goodbye. Just a note on the kitchen counter. Don't call. I need a man who knows how to keep a fire burning, not one who keeps blowing it out. Ryan sat in the empty apartment, cigarette smoke curling around him. The air smelled of burnt dust and regret. Somewhere in that haze, he heard my voice, not the old weak one from Maplewood, but the one from his childhood, the night of the gas fire in 1993. Don't leave your post until the fire is out. If you quit early, you lose the only thing that keeps you alive: discipline. Back then he laughed. Now he understood. He had walked away too soon, and the fire followed him home. 3 days later, a letter arrived, not for him, but for me. From Angela Brooks, Adult Protective Services, Mr. Kane, financial abuse confirmed. Withdrawals from your retirement account, total $41,200. Please confirm if you wish to proceed with prosecution. I sat for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. I didn't see a criminal. I saw the boy I once carried out of a burning warehouse, his arms locked around my neck, shaking, whispering, "Don't let go, Dad." I picked up the phone, called Angela. My voice was low, steady. "No prosecution," I said. "If justice is a flame, I want it to burn at the right time." 3 weeks later, Ryan came to Maplewood. Rain was falling. Cleveland rain, quiet and patient, the kind that doesn't strike, just sinks in. I was sitting in the rec room polishing my old fire helmet when the door opened. He stood there, soaked through eyes hollowed out by guilt and debt. Dad. Just one word, but it hit like a weight dropping through water. I looked up. "Son." My voice wasn't warm, wasn't cold. Just real. He looked around the room, the dull lights, the plain walls. "You really live here?" I set my coffee down. "For over a year now. And you just remembered." He sat, elbows on knees, fingers shaking. "I need help, Dad. A loan, just temporary. I'll pay it back. I swear." "How much?" "70,000. I owe the bank. Lisa, she's gone. And your job gone too." I studied him for a long time. Part of me wanted to shout, but the part of me that had walked through real fires knew better. Anger burns too fast. "You sold my house," I said finally, "to buy yourself an illusion. Now you want to borrow from the man you tried to erase. Do you really think justice comes that cheap?" He dropped his head, voice breaking. "I didn't mean to, Dad. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you." I smiled faintly, the kind of smile you give when the pain's too old to sting anymore. People always say that right before they light the match. Silence filled the room. Only the rain spoke, tapping against the windows. I stood, poured another cup of coffee, and placed it in front of him. "If you want another chance," I said quietly, "I have work, not money." The next morning, I met Sophie Walker in the hall. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "I'm sure." He was my son," I said. "Now he's a man who needs to earn his way back." She nodded slowly. "We could use another maintenance hand." That afternoon, Ryan returned. His eyes red, his hands rough, his shoes still wet from the rain. Caleb met him at the gate, cheerful as ever. New guy, huh? Welcome to Kane Veterans Home. Ryan hesitated. His gaze lingered on the sign on the letters, Kane glinting gold under the overcast sky. Caleb smiled, oblivious. They say that name's in honor of a firefighter who lived here once. He's the reason this place still stands. Ryan's lips trembled slightly. Yeah, he murmured. Maybe so. He started work that day, sweeping floors, changing bulbs, fixing door hinges. Nobody told him the truth that the man sitting quietly on the bench each afternoon watching him from the courtyard was the one who now owned everything he touched. That evening, Eleanor found me by the window. "Are you happy now?" she asked softly. "No," I said, "but I feel right." Right, yes. Because for once my son is finally learning the trade I taught him, fixing things. She studied me, her eyes kind but sharp. "And will you forgive him?" I turned toward the rain-streaked glass. Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a reward for those brave enough to admit they were wrong. I'm just waiting to see if he's strong enough to bow his head. Outside, the wind swept across the courtyard. The gold letters of Kane Veterans Home shimmered against the night, bright, alive, almost defiant. Ryan was still working in the shed, wiping the oil off a wrench, sweat dripping onto the concrete. I watched him, and in the quiet of my mind, I said the only prayer I've ever truly believed. Sometimes, to understand dignity, a man has to rebuild it in the same place he once destroyed it. Some fires burn for destruction. Others burn for truth. And every son, sooner or later, must face the smoke he made himself. No one truly changes in a single day. People only begin with something small, something that seems meaningless, but becomes the first brick in rebuilding who they are. That's how Ryan Kane began. Mornings at Kane Veterans Home smelled of weak coffee and fresh mop water. You could hear Caleb's broom scraping across the tiles before sunrise. Ryan was always the first to arrive. Gray maintenance uniform, head down, hands rough. Gone was the man who once drove an SUV and spoke like the world owed him something. Now he was the man who knelt to tighten screws, scrubbed dust from lamps, patched up chipped walls. Caleb showed him how to check faulty sockets, how to twist old valves without snapping the pipes. Sophie Walker, the new administrator, kept close watch. Every task logged, signed, and timed. Ryan never complained. He didn't argue. He just worked slow, steady, silent. I watched from a distance. Not as a father, not as an owner, but as a man watching another walk through fire, a fire that didn't need to be put out, just left to burn until it revealed what was worth saving. By the end of the first week, Ryan began speaking to the residents. Mr. Peterson, the man I once saved from choking, often waved him over. "Hey, son, can you help me with this wheelchair?" Ryan pushed him down the corridor, careful on the turns. Mr. Peterson grinned. "You know what, kid? The lights in this place don't just help us see. They remind us someone cared enough to turn them on." Ryan didn't respond. He just nodded, then paused for a moment, before leaving. Not out of exhaustion, but out of thought. One afternoon, Caleb said, "Hey, can you replace that light in the east hallway? It's dark over there. The old folks are tripping." Ryan nodded. He climbed onto a stool, unscrewed the old bulb, and twisted in the new one. When the light came on, it flooded the hallway with warm gold. For a second, his face, streaked with sweat, lit by the glow, looked exactly like the boy I once taught to change a fuse in our garage when he was 16. That light hit something deep inside me. Not regret. Recognition. The fire I thought had died in him was still there, faint, but alive. Then came the rain. Cleveland rain, soft, persistent, the kind that sounds like memory. Ryan was checking the heating vents when he heard a thud in the corridor. An old veteran, Mr. Raines, had collapsed beside a bench. No nurses nearby. Ryan ran. He knelt, checked the man's pulse, and shouted, "We need an ambulance, he's not breathing." Then he began compressions, steady, rhythmic, precise. Blood from a small cut on Mr. Raines's arm smeared across Ryan's shirt, but he didn't stop. 20 compressions later, the old man gasped. Air returned. Color came back. Ryan sat back, breath-ragged sweat mixing with rain. The paramedics arrived just in time. Sophie appeared behind them, her voice calm, almost astonished. "I thought you only fixed pipes," she said. Ryan exhaled, voice hoarse. "Now I fix whatever keeps people alive." When everyone left, I remained at the end of the corridor, watching him crouched there, trembling from exhaustion, his hands still shaking, but steady, steady in a way they'd never been before. I didn't speak, didn't praise him, didn't scold him. Sometimes silence is the only reward worth giving. 2 days later, Sophie handed him a small key. "The equipment room," she said. "It's yours now. Keep it organized." It was trust, simple, unspoken, real. Ryan spent hours cleaning that room, stacking wrenches, labeling drawers, sorting screws by size. The smell of oil and polish filled the air. It was the scent of discipline, the same scent he grew up with in my garage. Days turned into a rhythm. He worked, he ate, he rested. He started smiling at residents. He joined them at lunch. He even made coffee for Caleb. People say that when someone starts sharing again, they're relearning how to be human. Then came Thursday night. Sophie asked Ryan to drop off some maintenance reports in the management office. He knocked. No answer. The door was unlocked. The room glowed under soft light. He walked in, placed the folder on the desk. As he turned to leave, his eyes caught a frame on the wall. A document between 2 state health certificates. He stepped closer. Licensed operator, Whitman Holdings, LLC, authorized signatory, Douglas Kane. He froze. My name. Right there on the wall, plain, legal, undeniable. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. The truth stood before him, clear and sharp as flame, the place he worked for the man who gave him that second chance. They were one and the same. Sophie walked in a moment later. "Everything okay?" she asked. Ryan turned, voice tight but polite. "Yeah, just a bit dizzy. Too much work." "No," he said softly. "It's just, the lights in here are very bright." She smiled, not noticing. "Go get some air," she said, and left. Ryan sat down, hands over his face. No tears, just the sound of his own uneven breathing. Then he looked up at the document again, at the name he'd spent years resenting, and finally understood what it cost to build something worth his father's name. He stood, walked out quietly into the rain-soaked courtyard. I found him there later that night. He didn't look at me, just spoke to the darkness. "Dad, I learned something today." "What's that?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "That some things we think we've lost forever were never gone. They were just kept somewhere we didn't deserve to reach." I didn't answer. Didn't need to. The hallway light behind him, the one he'd fixed a week ago, shone softly across his face, half in light, half in shadow. He stood there between the two, the man he used to be, and the man he might yet become. I turned away, walked back to my room, and opened my notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote, "When a man bows his head, not from shame, but from understanding, that's when justice finally begins its work. Some fires burn to destroy, Others burn to cleanse. And the hardest lesson of all is learning to rebuild not what you lost, but who you were. Morning settled over Cleveland like a breath held too long. A thin mist floated above the garden, soft and gray, as if the whole city was waiting for someone to exhale. I sat among the roses, pruning shears in hand. Petals from the first bloom of the season had begun to fall pale red like dried blood fading on old stone. They didn't know they'd been beautiful. They simply fell quietly, completely. Then came footsteps, slow, hesitant, but familiar enough that I didn't need to look up. Ryan stopped behind me, his breath shallow, the faint scent of cigarette smoke hanging around him. "Dad," he said, voice rough. I know." I kept trimming. "Know what that you're behind Whitman Holdings. That this place, it's yours." Another snip of the shears. The sound was sharp, clean. "I don't own this place," I said softly. "I just tend the fire." He frowned. "Tend the fire?" "Yes," I said. "Not to burn anyone, but to remind the world that without a keeper, fire always finds the wrong direction." He was silent. Then with a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he said, "I betrayed your trust. I thought I was helping, but all I wanted was to prove I was better than the man who built me." The wind stirred. A petal dropped and landed on my boot. I looked at it, then said quietly, "I've stood inside fires started by my own crew, and I never cursed them, never hated them. I just thought if I don't pull them out, the flames will take me too. You see, son, hatred is smoke. You don't realize it is suffocating you until you can't breathe anymore." Ryan broke down. Not the way a man cries when he loses money or pride, but the way a soul cracks when it finally sees itself. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered through tears. "I took everything from you. I deserve worse than a courtroom sentence." I set the shears down, turned toward him. "No," I said. "You don't need a judge. You need a conscience. And from what I can see, it's finally awake." A woman's voice broke the silence. "May I come in?" It was Angela Brooks from Adult Protective Services. A thick black folder was tucked under her arm. "Mr. Kane," she said, "the investigation's closed. Ryan has agreed to full restitution, repaying the withdrawn funds, submitting to financial oversight and mandatory ethics training. We're classifying the case as voluntary remediation." I nodded. "Thank you." She smiled faintly, then turned to Ryan. "You're lucky," she said. "Some lessons the courts can't teach, only a conscience can." She closed the file and left, leaving behind the kind of quiet that makes the air itself feel heavier. I reached into my coat pocket. From inside, I pulled a small, tarnished medal. The edge scratched, the engraving faded, Cleveland Fire Department, Valor and Service. I'd received it in 1987 after the chemical warehouse fire, the night I pulled Captain Harold Whitman from the inferno. I placed the medal in Ryan's trembling hand. "Not because you've earned it," I said, "but because I believe you'll learn to." His fingers tightened around it. "Dad, you still believe in me." "I do," I said, "but believing doesn't mean forgetting." Tears welled up again. I didn't wipe them. A man should learn to cleanse himself with his own remorse. 2 weeks later, the main hall of Whitman Kane Veterans Home was filled with light. A new brass plaque had been mounted on the wall. Its engraving read, "In honor of Harold Whitman, for those who served and never stopped serving." The metal glowed beneath the afternoon sun, reflecting warmth like a living flame. Residents gathered in their wheelchairs and seats. Caleb adjusted the microphone. Sophie Walker stood beside the podium, and I sat in the front row, both hands resting on my cane. Sophie's introduction was brief. Then she handed me the mic. I rose slowly. The room quieted. Even the hum of the air vents seemed to fade. My voice, deep cracked, steady, echoed through the speakers. Harold Whitman once told me, "Honor isn't something you're given. It's something you hold on to even when no one remembers you still exist." Today, I don't just honor him. I honor everyone who chose dignity over comfort, integrity over convenience. A soldier can retire from service, but never from the duty of being human. The hall stayed silent for a beat. Then came the applause, slow, deliberate, the kind that doesn't celebrate but agrees. At the back of the crowd, Ryan stood in his gray maintenance uniform, head bowed, shoulders shaking, not from shame but pride. A week later, journalist Ethan Miller returned. He carried a fresh copy of the Cleveland Sentinel. The headline read, "The Firefighter Who Chose Care Over Comfort." I smirked. "You're writing about me again." Ethan shook his head. "No, sir. I'm writing about what you built. You just happen to be the proof." I looked out the window. Ryan was in the courtyard repairing a wooden bench for the residents. Each movement calm, deliberate. "Then write about them," I said. "About the people who still believe that honor isn't something you can cut from a budget." The article ran that Sunday. Hundreds of letters poured in from veterans groups. One said, "You made me believe there's still room for dignity in a world measured by profit." Another simply read, "Honor doesn't retire." No signatures. None were needed. That evening, I walked back to the Rose Garden, the same spot where Harold used to sit beside me years ago. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the new plaque until it looked like it was glowing from within. Eleanor came out carrying a teapot. "You kept your promise," she said. "What promise?" I asked. "That you'd make people remember honor not by words, but by what they see you do." I smiled faintly. "Honor never dies, Eleanor. It just waits for someone brave enough to live up to it." Ryan came last. No words. Just a hand on my shoulder and a bow of his head toward the plaque. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Sometimes redemption doesn't need an apology. Just silence at the right time. The wind rose and the roses began to shed again, petals falling like soft red rain. In the fading light, the metal in Ryan's hand caught a glimmer, not bright, not blinding, just enough to show that the light had finally found its way home. We all serve in different ways. Some with weapons. Some with words. Some simply by refusing to forget what's right. And maybe that's what honor really is, not something you keep, but something you keep alive. Months passed. Autumn came late to Ohio. The air held that mix of cool earth and slow sunlight that only arrives after a long summer. From the small radio at the nurse's desk came an old country song, a raspy male voice singing about promises kept and roads that never end. Out in the courtyard, the wooden chess table had been sanded and repainted. Black and white stones lay neatly in place. A few residents sat nearby, soaking up the sun. No one spoke loudly, yet soft laughter drifted through the air, the sound of a place that had finally learned how to breathe in peace. I sat on the porch bench at the edge of the garden. Beside me, a cracked ceramic coffee mug and my old fire helmet number 47, scarred, dented the only thing left from 3 decades inside the flames. The coffee was thin, the air smelled faintly of smoke and metal, and for the first time in years, every sound around me felt harmless. In front of me, Ryan trimmed roses alongside a few residents. Same gray maintenance uniform, same frayed sleeves. But the look in his eyes was new, clear, steady, at peace. He knew everyone's names now. Who needed what pills? Which handrail wobbled? Which light flickered? He fixed them all not because he had to, but because he wanted to. "Ryan, you're cutting that branch unevenly," called old Mr. Peterson. "I know," Ryan replied, smiling. "It'll grow even next season." "You learn fast," Peterson chuckled. Ryan shook his head. "No, sir. Just relearning." I couldn't help but smile. That one word, relearning, felt like confession and redemption rolled into one. Eleanor Marsh, my first roommate at Maplewood, sat by the lavender bushes now. She was frailer these days, her shawl slipping from thin shoulders. Her eyes were cloudy, but her voice still sharp. "I remember when people used to eat here like no one was watching," she said softly. "Now, they look each other in the eye again. You brought dignity back to this place." I turned toward the garden, the laughing residents, the young staff who cared because they wanted to, not because they were paid, to the roses blooming evenly along the porch. "No, Eleanor," I said quietly. "I just kept the fire. They're the ones who lit it." She smiled faintly. "So, the fire never went out." I looked toward the horizon, the Ohio sky pale and endless. "No," I said. "It just changed its shape." Around noon, the television in the rec room hummed with a midday news report. The anchor's voice was calm, detached, the tone of someone reading justice like the weather. "Future Holdings has officially filed for bankruptcy. Company executives face charges of investor fraud and illegal cuts to medical operations." I sipped my coffee. It tasted bitter, not with anger, but with justice. Justice that arrives quietly, right on time, without needing an announcement. The ticker below scrolled another headline: Lisa Kane, involved in tax violations related to Future Holdings subsidiaries, is reportedly cooperating with investigators. I barely glanced at it. The world keeps burning itself, I thought. I don't need to add more fire. A third headline followed: Former Maplewood administrator Alan Morris loses countersuit against ex-staff. License revoked. 10-year professional ban. I exhaled slowly. Everyone has their own fire, the only difference is what they choose to burn. By evening, sunlight poured through the large windows of the main hall. It lit up the bronze letters of the sign outside: Whitman Kane Veterans Home. The gold shimmered like it had just been polished. Inside, Ryan was cleaning the glass display case, the one that held medals, caps, and faded photographs of the men who'd served before us. I stepped in quietly. He noticed me but didn't flinch. The fear was gone. Only calm remained. From his pocket, he pulled the silver medal, the one I'd given him a year ago, the one that once hung heavy with shame. He turned it slowly in his hand, watching the light dance across its scratched surface. Then, without a word, he opened the case and hung it right in the center beneath a photograph from 1987, me and Harold Whitman, standing in the smoke, hands gripping a rescue rope. Ryan locked the glass, stepped back, and rested his hand against it, not to claim it, but to let it go. No one spoke. No one needed to. The radio switched songs. Take It Easy floated softly through the hall, simple, quiet, human. I sat down. The coffee had gone cold, but I took another sip anyway. Outside, the sunset spread gold across the floor. It caught the edge of Helmet 47, its scratched metal glowing faintly, like a flame reborn. I closed my eyes, heard the distant laughter of the residents, the faint siren of an ambulance somewhere in the city, and the rustle of wind through rose branches. No heaviness, no rage, only peace. The fire doesn't die, I thought. It just finds another shape, sometimes as a glance, sometimes as forgiveness. When I opened my eyes, Ryan was outside talking to Caleb. They were laughing, easy, unguarded, the way men laugh when they've finally stopped pretending to be strong. On my son's face, there was no arrogance, no shame, only calm. The kind of calm that comes after you've walked through your own ashes and kept walking. I smiled. Harold Whitman once told me honor isn't something you carry away, it's something you leave behind for others to hold. Now I understood. Completely. Night fell. The courtyard lights flickered on. Their glow reflected on the bronze plaque at the gate, Whitman Kane Veterans Home, gleaming like a fire that refuses to die. Eleanor was asleep. Caleb was locking up. Ryan stood by the gate, hands behind his back, shoulders straight. A small smile on his face, the kind you wear when you've finally found where you belong. I leaned back in my chair, whispering to no one in particular. Justice, even when it comes late, is better than never coming at all. But forgiveness only comes from a heart that no longer needs to win. If it were you, could you forgive the child who once betrayed everything you worked for? Leave your thoughts in the comments and share this story so that the fire of honor and redemption can travel a little further.